Hello, this is Tony Kelly, your host of Birmingham Breakthroughs TV. Our Health is Our Wealth show. Now, we have our next guest lined up today, Elsie Gayle, a midwife and honorary fellow of Wolverhampton University. Elsie, it's an honor and a privilege to have you here on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Tony. I look forward to doing this chat.
Okay. So, let us start, please, with you telling the listeners and viewers, because you're not a household name, you're not like the president or the prime minister. Tell us a bit about your early upbringing and childhood. That's the best place to start, Elsie, I feel.
Okay. So I was born in Jamaica, in Kingston. I was the first child for my parents, Carl and Dorothy Janke. Both of them were civil servants. My mother was a nurse, and my father was a civil servant. He worked for various ministries in Jamaica. I went to primary school, secondary school in Jamaica. I did my O-levels and then started my A-levels and abandoned that to actually go out to work for myself then.
Tell us what secondary school you went to.
So I went to Excelsior High School, which
I know it well.
a very forward-thinking headmaster, as a matter of fact. We had a wide variety of lessons. We did music, commercial, and all the sciences, all the arts. We had games. Once a year there was an Eisteddfod, which is all the houses competed against each other, and it was, ways we expanded ourselves as human beings, as young people. We did debating. We had in fact, one of the things my colleague and I did at the time, we set up a students' council. We printed a newspaper. We charged people, I can't remember if it was 10 cents or something like that, but we actually were encouraged to be entrepreneurial and thinking out of the box. So it was really a really good time. I enjoyed my secondary school life.
And if my memory serves me right, and tell the viewers a bit about that, you were involved in Jamaican folk music. Tell us a bit about your folk music side of things.
So music has always been an essential part of my life. I think I might have been born to music, certainly grew up in our house. We had a variety of music. There was classical music, but we were also encouraged to take part in church. I was on the church choir. I was in the junior choir at church, and from a young age. And then at school, when we were having these inter-house competitions, I was eventually able to set up a group they were just a school group competing in the music section. But the group that we set up is still going now as the Carry Folk Singers in Jamaica.
I know them well. Mm-hmm.
So there was a time when I sang with the Jamaican Folk Singers, and that was really a good time. I met quite a few professional musicians at the time, including Olive Lewin, who is no longer with us, sadly. Mm-hmm. But she was like the original musicologist, bringing up a lot of our African music, the music of our ancestors really, and sharing it and making it, there were digging songs, lullabies, women's wailing songs. It was absolutely awesome, really, in terms of the music.
Well, our paths might have crossed, possibly, but they didn't, because I sang too with the Jamaica Folk Singers.
Right, okay.
And Olive Lewin actually sang at our wedding.
Oh, really?
Yes, so,
gosh, okay.
we do have something in common there in terms of our love of folklore, folk music, which we need to pass on to our children and grandchildren. It's so important. Thanks for that, Elsie. So you, instead of going on to do your A-levels, you decided to, after you did your O-levels, did well, you went into the world of work. Take us through your first job, second job. What did you do after leaving High School?
I just want to say that what I did was I crammed my A-levels into 1 year.
Oh, I see. Right.
Right. So I did, but I was desperate to get out in the world to work.
Bright spa.
Well, I don't know about that. But I went to work with the Institute of Jamaica in the Jamaica Reference Library, West India Reference Library. And that took me further on the journey into our heritage, because in the West India Reference Library are all the archives of slavery, indentured labor, colonialism, and all those things, you know, really. So it was all the academics who were doing, like the historians, the well-known historians, Professor Vereen Shepherd, Kamal Braithwaite, all these people would come to the library to look at the archives. So we were responsible then for finding them, fishing them out, and then so I learned quite a lot about our history in terms of, you know, what was in the archives then. So for me, that was helping to embed what was already our history. So things I'd grown up with as a child, and certainly in the time of doing, I did West Indian history at school. I didn't like European history, and I think that's one of the reasons I abandoned my A-levels in the first year. So I wasn't really keen on that. So West Indian Reference Library, you know, sort of doing a lot of that work, learning a lot about our history. And some of it is still not well known until today, really.
Right. Well, we have a duty and a task and a responsibility to keep on making it well known, which is why we're doing programs like these, to make youngsters more aware, and even some adults more aware of.
Yeah.
We have a rich tapestry and history
We do.
from the Caribbean, which needs to be shared. And then you left there, and my understanding is you then went to the big bad apple, New York. Huh? Why would one leave there to go to New York? Tell the viewers, please, what led you there?
Well, my girlfriend and I, so we have been friends. We're still friends now. We were friends since we went to high school. We were 11 when we went to high school.
And her name is?
Diana Austin. So she now, with her family, migrated to the US. And I went to join them for a bit. And I was working at the Jamaican consulate there. I could have stayed on, but my work there, I mean, I did enjoy, you know, it was my first time actually living away from home proper. I was living with her family, so I was, you know, under guard, so to speak. And working at Jamaican consulate, so I was actually traveling in from Brooklyn to Manhattan to work. But one of the things I actually learned there was the violence that was New York, that sat behind, you know, how New York operated. So working in the registry at the consulate, things would come in. So for example, the thing I saw that really, really shocked me was a photograph of somebody who had been shot. And yes, it was, I still remember, you know, it's faded a bit, but I still remember the photo of the person who had been shot. And really what was happening, the police were seeking identification of this person. Okay. So it kind of gave me an insight into what was going on outside of the family life that I was living with my friend. So I think there was a time that, you know, I thought to myself, no, I have to, let me go to England, because I had already experienced 3 months in England. My parents brought my brother and myself on holiday some years before that. So we actually travelled all up, and we came into London, and then we travelled up the East Coast to, is it Edinburgh, Glasgow? Edinburgh, I think, is on that side. And then we went across to Glasgow and then all the way down. So my parents were actually revisiting some of the institutions and that they had done their higher education, but also visiting friends. My mother trained here as a nurse.
I see.
So she trained and then she went back home. So we were visiting like her batchmates and their families, and you know, it was a really nice holiday actually. It was 3 months long and it was really good. So I got it that it was calmer here.
Oh, right,
so.
You fell in love with England.
Yeah,
as opposed to
I didn't like the cold, I have to say. It
who
was
does?
wet and cold.
Join the club.
Yeah.
Right. So from after the 3 month stay, I take it you then went back to Jamaica.
Yes, I did.
Right. And then take us from there now, where you decide to branch into whatever profession or career. Take us through how that came about.
Okay, so I applied to do my nurse training in Jamaica. I was interviewed there. We had to have permission to leave Jamaica, to undertake training. And I got permission. I was accepted in my mother's old training school, as a matter of fact. I chose it because it is in the southernmost part of England, so it would have been hopefully the warmest. And so when I returned to Jamaica...
Is this Eastbourne?
It is Eastbourne,
right.
Yes. How did you guess? So then I came, I left home with my few little belongings and came to London, travelled down to Eastbourne, where I then started my nurse training.
Right. And as a black woman back then, what was the whole idea of nurse training, midwifery? What was that all like for you? Were you welcomed with open arms? And how was Britain back then for you?
Well, I to be honest, I was excited. So I think I might have even, whatever negative things that were around me, where I would miss them because I was a young person. This was my life. I was out and about and meeting equally interesting and keen young people. So Eastbourne at the time had quite a few other than white English training, so there were lots of Filipinos, there were lots of Irish girls, Jamaicans, Barbadians. It was a grand mixture.
Right.
And I was actually welcomed by a young woman who was in her third year. She was Jamaican in her third year. And, just got to know her. She showed us around and stuff like that. So it was, yeah. But it was good. It was good.
And how long was the midwifery training? How many years?
Well, I was doing nurse training, so that was 3 years.
The midwifery came afterwards.
That's correct.
Right. And somewhere along this trajectory, you met the love of your life.
Right, okay.
Tell us a bit about how that came about.
Well, as you do when you are a young nurse in training, a group of us actually gathered and we would go out for nights out. And there was a club in Brighton that played 70s music really.
Right up your street.
Yes, indeed. A lot of soul music. And these were guys who were at the university who were, holding this, we used to call it a disco really. And so the three of us would travel over to Brighton to enjoy this music, have a dance, a drink. And then one of the girls, who's still my friend these days, now, she lived in Brighton, so we had somewhere to stay. So we would come over, go after the club, and then go off. And then I was introduced to my now husband one night at this club.
In a nightclub?
In a nightclub.
Wow, okay. I'm not so sure. I'm not going to ask whether it was love at first sight, because the nightclubs are very dark and psychedelic lights and so on. But tell us your husband's name and tell us about the immediate family then.
Right. So his birth name is Canute, but everybody calls him Bunny. So
pet name as usual.
Indeed,
yes.
indeed.
And the rest of the family?
What, his family?
No, your family, your immediate family.
Oh, my children. So we have 3 children. The eldest is Matthew. He lives in Trinidad with his young family now. We have a middle son called Carl. He's still at home with us, thank goodness. I need a little helper. And a daughter, Thea, who lives, she's moved away at the moment. She's away. She's working away.
Right, I see. So tell us a bit more then, Elsie, about your midwifery and the profession you chose, nursing, and then and any trials and tribulations and achievements and so on.
Okay, so
break that down a bit for us.
All right. So I did 3 years of nurse training. Got married in the middle of that actually, when he was finishing his degree. So he had finished his degree and we got married in the middle of that, my parents came for the wedding.
From Jamaica.
Yes, and my sister. Not everybody could go. And my friend Sue, who her parents lived in Brighton, or in Falmouth actually, Olive, her mum, she made our dress, and her parents organized our wedding before my parents came. So my parents came, they stayed at their house, and the wedding went off really well. Really well. It was, small, but so enjoyable. In the deep midwinter it was as well. But it was good. And then my parents went back home. But soon after getting married, I transferred my training because my husband got a job in Hertfordshire. Okay. So I then transferred my training up to Essex and completed my nurse training. But right at the beginning of my nurse training, I met the profession of midwifery. We were able to do options. And I chose the option of doing, they call it obstetrics. And I just fell in love with the profession of midwifery. Don't ask me what it is. I have no idea until this day why it's so attractive. To me, it's like music is to me, really, the profession. So as soon as I'd finished my nurse training, well, I'd applied before I finished and did my midwifery training. And that was really an awesome time. Deep learning, meeting women, making connections. In essence, I'm a very shy person. But
I wouldn't have thought so.
No, you won't. But, the ability to actually meet and connect with, I really was, it was really good. So, yes, and I've been a midwife ever since.
Yes, and some of the places where I know you've done midwifery, Chelmsford, Portsmouth, Oxford, Bristol, and Birmingham. So
that's right.
Quite but somewhere within all of that, I think you went back home for a while.
Yes, basically what happened was my husband finished with his job. I mean, I think I've been really fortunate to meet such a man because he's helped me to travel the country and then the world. So he took redundancy from his place of employment, and the Jamaican government recruited him to work in Jamaica. So we packed up all our things in 2 containers and we went back.
And how many
to
children
Jamaica.
were at that stage?
3.
All 3? So
We'd had 3 children by then, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But Thea was a baby when we started travelling. And so we went to Jamaica, back to Kingston, which was a really, in many ways, great, because I was able then to spend a lot of time with my mother, doing a lot of sitting on the veranda, looking up on the hills.
Sitting on the veranda.
Yes,
those were the days.
Honestly, having a scotch and just chatting and it was just, honestly now I really relish those times. So, yeah. And then we were burgled, and that really just put me off. It and then the violence again. Violence, I don't do well with violence at all. So we transferred to Montego Bay, where I did actually then get a job. I was working at Type 5 clinic in Montego Bay, doing quite a bit of work with HIV, AIDS, contact tracing. So the current pandemic for me now is really, looking to see how it is that public health work there and how it's working here now, how are things being managed. And then again, violence was the marring, and I just really, honestly, it was terrible because I consider myself a true-born Jamaican.
Yes.
So it was really painful.
To uproot.
Yes, again. Nevertheless, sitting on the veranda on Montego Bay, the Sunday paper comes, and lo and behold, Botswana is looking for people. Engineers, teachers, nurses.
We're talking Botswana in Africa here.
That's correct. So we apply, we're interviewed, we're accepted, we put all our stuff in the containers.
And when you say we're talking both yourself and your husband.
Yes.
Are interviewed for jobs in Botswana.
That's correct.
And Sorry
So
to
he's a
interrupt.
no, that's okay.
Mm.
So he's an engineer. Well, his profession is he's a mechanical engineer by profession, and he was recruited as the engineer for the second city in Botswana. I was recruited as a nurse midwife, so nursing had to come back on my agenda as well. But that was okay because it gave me a chance to revisit nursing, update myself and my skills and so on, and actually referring to my then manager, helping me to sort of find the books and things to be looking at. So she helped me to focus. So everything went in a container, and off we went to Botswana. We did one term there. That was really, really exciting. So it was a chance then for the children to go to school with children from all over the world, to learn different languages and ways of people living. And also we took the opportunity then to visit Zimbabwe.
I see.
That was just awesome because if you think, so we're driving from Botswana up to Zimbabwe, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I never ever thought I would be in this part of the world, driving a car, living. So we did that. We tried to utilize the time to, meet people from these different countries. Also for the children to see that actually,
Yes.
The world is not just Britain, it's not England, it is full of other people. And then we also did South Africa as well. We would take the car down actually for servicing there. So we did South Africa as well. So it was really, really brilliant.
I have some friends who have visited South Africa. We've never been, but they say it's one of the most picturesque and beautiful countries imaginable.
Yeah. And the good thing for the children, the school that the younger children went to was an English medium school. So the ordinary primary and secondary, they would teach in Setswana rather than in English. So the younger children went to an English medium school, and they travelled. They would take the children on trips to stay over. So they actually saw a lot more of the continent than we did, to be honest. But it was lovely. I mean, we lived in the community with everybody else. So people who were expats, but also people who were native Botswana. And we made quite a few friends. So did the children. And we still have them until today.
That's good to hear. Now, so from Botswana, the Botswanan government had you both there. You then decided after the contract ended to return where? To Jamaica or to England?
Well, I wanted to go to New Zealand.
Oh, really? What's the attraction of New Zealand?
Well,
there's more sheep here in New Zealand than people. So.
Well, New Zealand attracted me as a country because of the countryside. It was also a place for midwifery practice. Midwives in New Zealand work in a very different. They work the way midwives ought to work. Yeah.
Okay.
So I actually got registered in New Zealand as a midwife. But then, the discussion with my husband and our eldest son, actually. So if he needed to go to university, we had to come back so he could, fulfill the criteria. So, in fact, I came back with him so he could go to A-level, do his A-levels here. And then the others followed. So, we packed up everything in the containers and back we came.
I'm not going to say you're nomadic or travelers, but you certainly have, and you've exposed your children, which is very good, to different
honestly,
cultures and so on. That will hold them in good stead for whatever discussions are happening out there in terms of diversity, etc., and different how people live in various parts of the world. Then you end up here again, and you decide to go into midwifery to continue your career. Now I know you've gone way up the ladder without saying, but along the way you had to do certain things. You were not seen, my understanding, as being up to the standard, or had to do any retraining or anything like that.
Yes, and I was really shocked when I came back. So I came back here with all these knowledge and skills that we had to do a lot of training. Working in Botswana as a nurse midwife, you had to be tip top because we, in many ways, we worked as doctors.
Yes, right.
Really. So we had to upskill ourselves to really function there in a responsible way. So coming back here then, I was so shocked to have to do a return to midwifery practice. They accepted me to work as a nurse, which wasn't really my forte.
Yeah, right.
So I was able to work as a nurse, and I was given a job as a nurse, but I had to return to midwifery practice. That actually caused some problems for me and for the people. I returned to work in the same unit that I'd left.
Oh, I see.
So it caused problems because I think a lot of people were confused because all of a sudden I couldn't do midwifery stuff, but I could do nursing stuff. And that actually caused bullying, somebody to bully me. And that was, I would say, one of the most horrendous times of my career as a clinician. I felt unsafe. I felt as though I didn't want to continue my life. It's really terrible to say. I'm never a glass half empty person. I'm always a glass half full person. Very positive. But that really shook me when I started to have these terrible thoughts. But thankfully, I overcame that and moved on in terms of my work.
Before, I need to touch on the bullying because young people, children listening to this will wonder, how exactly did you, what was the bullying for? Why was this person bullying you? How did you overcome it? How did you deal with it? Because there might be people who are wanting to hear, now how did Elsie Gayle, who is a eloquent, articulate woman, remembering this incident and this period of time where you were being de-skilled and downgraded, how exactly did you overcome all of that bullying? And was this person a threat to you? Or?
Well, I honestly, I hadn't done anything to her. But I think the organisation in which I was working was really quite toxic. The NHS is a very hierarchical place, really. And the person who sits at the bottom is the person who you have to kind of prove yourself. But I didn't understand why I had to do that because I'd already been in the situation, do you know what I mean, and working as an autonomous clinician. But there was a lot of bullying going on. And I actually didn't recognize it at first. It was a healthcare assistant that said to me, she said, Elsie, do you realize this is what's happening to you? And you need to go and talk to Oki Health. So in the conversation with Oki Health and drawing out all the things that were going on, then is when I realized. But I wasn't so far gone as to not want to sort it out. So I spoke to my supervisor of midwives. I resisted being bullied. I refused to have anything to do with this person until we addressed it. And I still have a recording of the meeting. So we agreed to record the meeting. I still have it. I have to keep these things, really.
Yes.
So...
Which you will then pass on to your children and grandchildren. They might say, was mom ever like that? As timid as ever, or as not the mom that we know?
But thankfully, there was, a space in midwifery. We don't have supervisors of midwives anymore. But my supervisor was a really good person in terms of drawing out the issues. And she supported me through the return to practice. I completed it and then decided to step up.
Right. So that is showing, although you were being bullied, there has been or there was a positive outcome from it in terms of for you. We don't know what's ever happened to the bully. But then let's even be more positive and say, of course, your career has sort of blossomed and bloomed and gone since then. What else has there been?
Well, it has, but I just want to say that the person who was bullying me at the time, I don't think she quite realised what was going on either. It was just, the normal sort of carry on. But we have resolved that situation.
Right.
we resolved it.
Okay.
So
That's good to hear.
we are, I wouldn't say we are buddies,
Yeah.
but we are respected, respectful colleagues now, for sure.
Oh, so you still
Yes,
still have to be in
definitely.
touch with this person?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yes, but as I
Right.
said, we're not buddies,
Yes,
but
yes,
yeah,
yes. That's good.
yeah.
So, take us onwards and upwards. Tell the viewers and listeners, career-wise, where has that led to from there?
Right. So, my recognizing that mothers and babies of African descent and midwives of African descent do not fare as well as their white European counterparts has made me begin to try and do something about that from the year, is it about 2002, really, my work in that. So I've become an activist and a change maker towards improving our outcomes. And I think I was really on the very early curve of recognizing this. And I think because I'd left and not been, they say if you put a frog in water and boil up the water, the frog will not recognize and will die. Whereas if you drop a frog into boiling water, they'll jump out. So I was that frog. I was dropped into this boiling water, and it was like a total shock because I've never experienced that sort of, organization before. So it has helped me to sort of focus on being what we are trained to do, to work and walk with women, to work with our colleagues, students, people who are aspiring to work in our footsteps when we move on to other things, in ways that are good and that help us as a community. So that's basically what I've done all the time. I raise my voice, I raise concerns, and what happened then was I ended up losing my job. So I lost my job. It was a massive challenge. Nearly lost my home. Thankfully, my children and my relationship with my husband never faltered, and we've just soldiered on. Thankfully, the NHS is now recognizing that there are whistleblowers who are raising genuine concerns. And so I was interviewed to become a part of the pilot to return genuine whistleblowers back into the NHS. My work hasn't actually taken me back into the NHS. What I said at my interview was, there is no change. So what I would like to do is to create a midwifery practice which will inspire young people to come into the profession, because we need good midwives, and also to work with other colleagues who want to work in ways that are helping our communities to get rid of the disparities, so that we actually have a chance to grow our babies well, to birth them well, and to nurture our families and our communities. Because the first 1,001 days from conception to age 2 sets a life course that also is said to go on into the generations. And if we don't actually have a good start in our life, it will lead us, I would say, from the womb to the mental health system, to the criminal justice system, and then so on. So it actually damages our communities when we don't have good midwifery care. And that is my main focus now, really and truly.
Wow, that's interesting to hear. So, tell me a bit about, you have an honorary midwifery title with Wolverhampton University. How did that come about?
Well, I think that was offered to me. In fact, I thought it was a scam when I got an email from the university saying, they're considering this honorary degree. Would I accept it? So having sort of bottom line then and thinking that yes, actually it is for real. So it was offered to me because I do quite a lot of work around Black mental health and reproductive justice for the Black community. and that is what it's for. So I've accepted it on the basis of the support for the community, on behalf of the community and the people that are working towards it. So, yeah, and it's great.
Congratulations,
Yeah,
and
thank
well
you.
done on that award.
Thank you.
And that's about you also then giving back to the community, because you've got all this experience and all of this knowledge. And I like the fact that you're an advocate, an activist, somebody who is going to speak up on behalf of especially mothers, black women, going through the whole issue of stillbirth, childbirth, and all the issues surrounding that. So you touched on, very briefly, inequalities. I'm going to ask you for your take on, we have the pandemic, we have the coronavirus, we have the COVID-19, and we hear about all, the word they use a lot is comorbidities, whether it be diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, not a good immune system, dementia. And more black people are succumbing, i.e. dying or ending up in intensive care units or actually contracting this. And we're talking about Britain here as opposed to the Caribbean, where, yes, Jamaica, for argument's sake, has still under 300 deaths. What's your take as to why this is all happening? And you have a solution to it? You are in the healthcare profession, so what's your take on why are we more susceptible, more prone as black people?
I have to say, I think it's a systemic racism problem. You know, racism is embedded in this country, and I strongly think it's coming out of that. So we have to do something about it in terms of the systems that we work with. So, for example, if you look at the mental health system, our black people are more likely to be sectioned. They have more drugs given to them. They're not well treated in there. And I know a lot of this from researching, reading, and I was also a governor for Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation Trust for a time. I did a term there. So I was able to look into, the systems, and I conclude myself that there is something systemic. But there are also people within the systems, black and white, who feel that racism is not a problem, and that people are just running up their mouth about these things, and it is.
But hasn't the evidence from the COVID-19 deaths, and so has that not proven beyond doubt that there is an issue there, as you rightly said, of systemic racism? Has that not proven the case? Has COVID-19, coronavirus, pandemic, what have you, lockdown, has that not proven beyond any doubt that there is a problem which does need to be addressed?
Yes. But what I think is it has amplified what a lot of people know. So if you look at maternity services, maternity services has been, all the statistics has been saying this. So since 2001, this has been the case for women of African descent primarily. But only in 2018 did it come to the fore, and now in 2019 everybody's screaming and shouting about it. Same thing in the mental health system. Look how long ago David Rocky Bennett died. Look at people in the criminal justice system, So what COVID has done, or the pandemic and the situation for people of African descent primarily has done, is to amplify it. So it's way out there, and nobody can actually deny that there is a problem. But I know that these things have been going on. And if you, as a person of African descent, because I do identify as a person of African descent, you feel these things. Some of them are slight. Some of them, nobody will really recognize it, but you feel it, you see it, how you're treated, as opposed to the person who came before you.
Yes. You mentioned the word feel twice. A well-known Jamaican saying, who feels it knows it.
Yes, indeed.
Let me touch on, because we're talking about midwifery and all the work that you're doing amongst black women who are either wanting to be mothers or having stillbirths and so on. It wasn't one of the questions I had in mind, but I'm going to ask it now. Hysterectomies seem to, over a period of time, been happening quite a lot. The taking out of a black woman's womb, instead of looking at other alternatives. You have any views on that?
Well, it's not really my forte. However, I
Mm-hmm.
do know that a lot of black women are complaining about hysterectomies.
Yes.
The issue sometimes is fibroids, and the treatment for fibroids sometimes doesn't. Palliative treatment doesn't always work.
Okay.
But also, there are hysterectomies that are happening as a result of poor maternity care, and that, yeah, it's very sad, very sad.
Yes. Now, let me talk about. I campaign a lot, as you know, as a diabetes ambassador. You do within your research. Um, I take it you go to lots of conferences. I know we're in lockdown at the moment, but people might say, well, oh, here is Elsie Gayle, honorary midwife from Wolverhampton University. Where can we get to hear more about her and so on? Share with us sort of social media or websites, or if people want to then say, hey, this black woman knows what she's on about. I need to be in touch with her.
Okay.
How can they?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I have a LinkedIn, and there's no website at the moment. There's no funding for a website as such, but any messaging, through Facebook, LinkedIn,
And this is
would come to me.
Elsie, and then Gayle, Gayle.
As in the cricketer, yes.
Okay. Oh, you're bringing in the West Indies into the equation as well. Right. Now, that's good to know. Let me just read out a few of the many accomplishments of your impressive CV. I would be here till Christmas if I had to
Oh,
read
no,
out all
totally
of them.
no.
But I need to read out a few. Project Midwife, Balsall Heath Community Development Trust. Patient Leader, National Health Service Midlands and East. Birmingham Link Women's Health and Maternity Group, and you were headhunted for that role.
I was, yes.
Governor of Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation Trust, lead for maternity and obstetrics, health watch and patient involvement, and the list goes on. Parliamentary outreach trainer and NHS ambassador for midwifery. I better stop there. What a roll call of involvement.
Well, let me say they are opportunities. I regard them as opportunities in the journey to making a difference to the lives of all women, but in particular women of African descent, their babies, the midwives, and aspiring midwives. In fact, our community, because to be honest, I don't see anybody really putting action into doing something, and the figures are getting worse.
Right.
So,
So I know your passion, your commitment, and your concern for the whole issue of black mothers, babies, and midwives. And you said the figures are getting worse. What's the solution to the problem? Because clearly there's a problem.
there is a problem. The solution is continuity of care and midwifery model to ensure that a mother and a midwife journey together in a therapeutic relationship. You're putting the woman at the center of her care. You're giving her the information so she can make a choice as to what is safe for her, to support her, to grow her baby well, to birth the baby, and to nurture that baby within the family structure, so that we're actually beginning a trail of good care with empowered women and improvement in the outcomes, because this is what is lacking. The NHS at the moment is struggling, and if you look at the research around what's happening to the people who care for care for women the best, people, they're very frustrated. So, but we can actually do something about it. We just have to have the will and the people in power to help it to happen. We're ready to go. I'm part of a group of midwives called Mimosa Midwives. We are ready to go. We've got our model developed. We've got all the key people in place. We've got a patron who is an emeritus professor of midwifery who's done this in this country and abroad. We've got a supervisor of midwives. We are ready to go. What we don't have is the funding and the commissioning. You know, we need to be commissioned to provide this service. Then we can evaluate it, Tony, because as we go along and implement it.
All right, let me ask you something about the funding, because with COVID-19, so much sums of money have been thrown all over the place for this and that and the other and so on. Surely there must be pots of money available within the government structure, the National Health Service, clinical commissioning groups to say, hey, here's a pot of money, you need to get on with doing what needs to be done. And also bringing in, because you're focusing a lot on it, cultural competence. So why is no money being put aside for?
All right. Well, I'll talk about the money in a minute, but I want to move away from, I want to step up from cultural competence. There is a New Zealand, you see, and this is the benefit of being worldwide.
Right. Yes.
There's a New Zealand nursing competence called cultural safety. And that is about shifting the power balance. So at the moment, the clinicians, the commissioners, and the men in grey suits have the power. The woman needs to have the power. And that's what cultural safety does. It shifts the power. And it can be applied to the woman, the individual. It also can be applied to the organization. So we've stepped up from competence. We're gone to safety now. So the woman will choose what is safe for her, and we support it.
So what is Britain afraid of? They keep on saying we're the world leaders in this and the world leaders in that. Is Britain on the whole afraid of taking models and examples from Botswana or from New Zealand, or are they so full of their own self and their own importance and their own arrogance that we don't want to look anywhere else? We know. But here you are, even as somebody they should be looking up to use. Why is it that in the 21st century we're having this sort of discussion?
Well, to be honest, what I think is we don't have a black academic midwife with the kudos in the same way we have white academic midwives. So the lens, we have white academic midwives that are looking at the problem per se. They're now recognizing that there is something else that they don't have full understanding of, which is where I know I have this full understanding. Because I never started my journey looking at I was looking at women. That was my training. People, the community, women. And then recognizing within this non-judgmental approach that there was something very judgmental going on.
The differences.
Yeah, so my lens is really different. What I don't have is the academic kudos. So anyway, I'm trying to work with the University of Wolverhampton to kind of do that now at this late stage in my life. And it is possible. We have a lot of young, vibrant, we always have had. I mean, in my teen years when I left school, I was looking at bright academic from the Caribbean, largely Jamaican, some Barbadian, and from the Caribbean. They were developing our history, and look, people like Vereen Shepherd, streets and miles ahead in many, many ways. So I know that we have, I was born into a culture where black people were as good as anybody else, if not better sometimes. But we don't have that here really. So our lens, my lens, from my understanding, is very different. And in this country, we get hammered if we speak up. We do get hammered.
So you've mentioned quite a lot of competent black healthcare professionals who are there doing their bit for the National Health Service and other health organizations within Britain. Let me ask you something, Elsie. We've just finished having Black History Month, and before that we had the whole Black Lives Matter agenda and all that was happening. Why is it when I look at the mainstream media, I'm talking BBC and ITV and the press as well, why when they feature the NHS, which was established in 1948, so it's now 72 years old, why do they never seem to, they airbrush out the contributions of the likes of yourself and your mother and others, why have they basically said, hey, the NHS, the National Health Service, has been there from Saltfish Shingling House, for those from Jamaica who would know that. So it's been around for. But why have they not given us the credit, just like they haven't for instance, for Mary Seacole?
Well,
All the emphasis is on Florence Nightingale.
Yeah.
What's behind all of that, you think?
As again, it's a group of people who think they're better than anybody else, and everybody else is a servant, and from whom we take or whom they take, and that is the basis of it all. So if you go back to Emperor Haile Selassie, talking about how racism is, it's endemic, and the UN talks about that as well. That people of African descent have the worst outcomes of all on the planet. And it is racism in its various forms. But we can't kind of dwell on that too much because we will become so depressed. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think the best thing is, I'm so great that at the time it was a challenge moving the children from place to place. In fact, moving the household from place to place. But reflecting now, people need to get out in the world, experience other people, recognize that actually we're just people on this planet. We are equally as good as the next man. Look what's happening in Africa now. Everybody's running to Africa to take out all the resources, because guess what? There are some resources in Africa that exist nowhere else. But everybody's going there to take out,
So I'm going to come back to COVID-19 because it bothers me. A lot of the African countries and the Caribbean as well, in terms of they'd put things in place and were so well prepared, because some of these countries had viruses like SARS and Ebola and so on, so they sort of knew exactly what to do to prepare for the pandemic. Why have we in Britain and the West, so to speak, not learned from that in preparation for what we're now going into a second lockdown? The first one, apparently, it was way too late by the time. What's this to do with? Is it to do with the economy, or people's lives don't matter, or what's your take on that?
Well, I can only think back to when I was in Jamaica and observing the public health nurses and how they operated. When there was anything suspicious, coming into the island, total lockdown. The nurses were at the airport. There was a lot of, they took things seriously. Right? There was no guessing. There was no sort of, people were on the ball. Here, well, I don't know really what, it's terribly political what's going on here, I think. There is a lot of arrogance around the pandemic and how viruses work, and people thinking that, it's just going to blow over. And people are not listening to the experts, I don't think. And that's created a lot of angst. People are very upset, people are angry, and then a lot of people who don't believe them. I think the government has kind of lost the trust of a lot of the people
along the way.
Honestly. And when I look at, in fact, I was having that discussion this morning with my husband. When you look at New Zealand, everybody just toed the line. They locked down the country, minimize, same thing. But here, it's and I think at the end of the day, to go back to it, we don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know the ins and outs of the pandemic. What I'm doing for myself, I continue to work. Women are coming out of the NHS to ask for help. They're paying for their care, and we're giving them one-to-one. We're taking the precautions, masking, all the PPE that we need. We're working well, not gallivanting and going to raves. We're keeping within. And that's all we can do at the end of the day.
That's pleasing to hear, very pleasing to hear. Now, I have to call you, Elsie, a glutton for punishment, because you're in the middle of doing a master's degree.
Well,
I'm not wanting you to reveal your age on camera, but for young people out there who seem to think, or if they pass 20, 25 and they can't do any more studies, you epitomize somebody who, even at this stage of your life, is doing a master's degree. Tell the viewers and listeners about that, because I'm impressed with that.
Well, it is the route to embedding the midwifery practice that I was talking about.
Right.
I'm not interested in academia per se,
Mm-hmm.
except for the fact that it will help to change the agenda, to change the disparities for mothers and midwives and the babies and our community. And the truth is, academia is seen as a thing that everybody aspires to. It is the thing that makes the difference. And this is one of the things about Britain. Everybody thinks, academics and so on. But it is the route that I'm using to understand what it is we need to do to prove that this thing can work. I'm trying to develop a sustainable model of midwifery practice which will make a difference to our community.
I like your answer there, because yes, I'm wanting to encourage the young people listening to this to education, education, education. And as my grandmother would say to me when I was growing up in Jamaica, go take your book, go take your book. But on the flip side of that, I'll tell you one person. He was the Prime Minister of Britain, John Major.
Yes.
Never went to university.
That's right.
So university is not the be-all or end-all. Some people have practical skills and are not good on the theory and want to go and use their hands to do what have you and so on. But kudos to you, the fact that you, with all your knowledge and experience and expertise, are deciding to go through, I probably use the wrong term when I say a glutton for punishment, but I probably want to come to your graduation whenever that might be.
Right.
Well done, Elsie. I'm pleased that you're doing that. You are a role model for one of the role models that you're about the fourth or fifth person I've interviewed, and you are on the top 6 of my list, and I have to get Elsie Gayle in because this is somebody who has a story to tell, especially on the health agenda. So how have you coped with the COVID-19 and the pandemic? You mentioned about you still have to do various things. But as a family, how have you coped? And what advice would you give to listeners out there, especially people on their own, coming into another lockdown? Remember the mental health side of things and all of that. Give the viewers and listeners some tips and advice.
Okay, so I think to be isolated is not what human beings are built for. So there needs to be some sort of communication, some involvement with other people. And I think that needs to happen. However, it happens. And that is a problem if people can't engage. So, but there are things like whatever it is that helps to make us feel good about ourselves. So there are things like dance. So I'm going right back into my roots now. Dance is really important. Music. For me, I'm telling you, if somebody were to come in here drumming, I'd be jumping.
Okay. It's African blood in you.
Well, do you know what I mean? You just cannot avoid it.
Really.
I'm not sure if the swimming pools are going to be open, but swimming is also a really good way of building our natural body feel-good factors.
So let me stop you and ask, can you swim?
I had to learn to swim.
So you can swim?
Yes, I can.
Right? Well, I raise that every time because I've had people on the program, Madge Milligan Green and Colin Sims, and now you, Elsie, dispelling the myth that black people can't swim, because I hear that so often that our bodies are not structured to make us swim in the water, and I think, come on,
that's not right.
That's not right.
No, well,
that's a negative racist stereotype, which I'm not prepared to accept. So here's another person, viewers and listeners, who can swim, and I presume the family members do as well.
Yeah, Jamaicans are swimmers.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, we have the sea all around, but my father swam. He swam for the school.
Right.
So people.
I had to bring that in, but yes, what other therapy or leisure pursuits or hobbies or what other things would you suggest people do during this lockdown, especially those vulnerable on their own? You've mentioned drumming, music, dancing.
Engaging with other people, whether it's by Zoom or FaceTime or something like that, but also connection with people who bring your groceries, family connections. These things are really important, and I think this is one of the things that perhaps the councils need to be thinking about. How do we help people? Because what we're doing is, in fact, if we're not addressing these things now, we're creating problems, mental health problems way down the line. And certainly in maternity care, this is one of the things that is concerning for people who are managing services, but also the mothers.
Wow. So we touched on some things. You yourself, you lead such a busy life in terms of work-life balance. What do you do to chill out, relax?
Right. My work is my life, is my relaxation. The way I work now is just totally embedded in my life. So this morning I did an antenatal. Before I came here, I did an antenatal visit with my colleague. We work really closely together. Then we had lunch. So it's keeping safe within the rules that the government has given us, but also making sure that we fulfill the other needs that keep us in a good mental space. I do a lot of online work. I'm forever at my computer, and then I get up and I wash the dishes sometimes, a bit of housework, things that keep me buoyant, really.
Right, I see.
And music.
And music.
And
yes,
music.
Music is a universal language.
Oh man,
so
honestly.
Yes. What advice would you give to any young viewers and listeners who are tuning in, wanting to embark on a career in nursing, then midwifery?
Or indeed midwifery, then nursing.
Yes.
Because that is,
Yes.
midwives can just train to be midwives.
Without doing the
Nursing, yes. That's
so
changed.
that's something the listeners and viewers need to hear. You don't have to do the nursing first, then branch into specialism of midwifery.
No.
You can just go and say, I want to be a midwife, and then, right. Okay.
That's correct.
I didn't know that. So
Yeah. That it changed. It used to be the other way around.
Mm.
So what I can say is that it is a challenge to get into midwifery, for sure. It's a lot of people have found it difficult, and they found themselves being pushed into nursing and then to come back to do the midwifery. But it's really important to make sure that you get your grades. So English and maths are really quite important. Get involved in some supporting. So for example, working as a doula support volunteer and so on. So getting some life experience. Life experience is really, really important, because actually what you're doing is building a relationship. In midwifery, you're building relationships which are therapeutic, which help people to do what they got to do well, and you're supporting that. We run an aspiring midwives course, so we do a 1-dayer or we do a 5-dayer with credits, and that's part of the journey. I was given these gifts to develop these things, or just have a chat. I'm happy to have a chat to anybody.
And you already gave out your details of how
yes,
to get in touch with
but they can get in touch with you, and then
Indeed,
you can,
Tony Kelly, diabetes@hotmail.com. Now you mentioned in terms of subjects, you said English and maths.
Very important.
You didn't mention any of the sciences here.
Well,
is that not part of health science, biology, chemistry, or general science? Or
there is a focus on English and maths as critical subjects anyway for every. A lot of people have problems with maths, believe it or not. But English is really important, because if you don't have English, you won't be able to understand the maths to do that. But then there's a science, and some people do health science or the biology, maybe not so much the chemistry and the physics. Although those things are helpful, but yeah. And there are access courses. If people have left school with no GCSEs, or indeed the GCSEs that they doesn't help them, then there are access courses that can be done to take them into it's really about going to university, because now you do a university degree, but you also then qualify as a midwife or a nurse. So there are two things, two strings to your bow, really there.
I'm going to bring the interview to an end by asking you, share with the listeners and viewers some final thoughts that you, Elsie Gayle, a midwife of many years outstanding, been to various countries, been there, done it, worn the t-shirt, and here we are in the 21st century. What final thoughts would you want to leave with the viewers and listeners, Elsie?
Well, certainly in terms of the COVID pandemic and life course, I think it's really important for people to look after their immune systems first and foremost. We don't know anything about any COVID vaccine or indeed if it's going to be effective and so on. So, women who are thinking about getting pregnant, they really need to be eating well, making sure that they keep themselves mentally well. Through pregnancy, caring for yourself well, making sure that you minimize fear, keeping as happy as you can be, really. Birthing well, breastfeeding is really important. So the tenets of a really great immune system for babies to be born through the vagina, their first inoculation, skin to skin with their mothers and their fathers, and then breastfed solely for the first 6 months of life, and then mixed feeding after. That sets the life course for that person, but also into the generations is what they're saying now. And then in terms of people who are already adults, young people coming up, follow the directions. Wear your mask if you're out and about. Keep away. Keep well. Eat well, and so on.
Wow. Sensible. Very, very sensible advice there, Elsie. Elsie Gayle, I'd like to thank you for coming in and sharing with us on Breakthroughs. Our health is our wealth, because that's what's the name of the program. Our health is our wealth. Breakthrough TV here in Birmingham. Thank you for coming and partaking with us. All the knowledge you have as a midwife, as a nurse, as a mother, as a midwife. I nearly said grandmother.
I am a grandmother.
And grandmother. Well,
twice over.
I'll add that to the equation. I didn't want to be,
yeah,
step over the right. Well, that's it as well. But thanks for coming in. It's been a pleasure having you in the studio, hearing what you have to say. The whole agenda. It's part of what this is all about. Getting us to change the narrative amongst the black community. There's just so many people out there doing wonderful things.
Yes.
And you're a classic example of that. And long may it continue. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Tony. It has been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks to our sponsors, the Afro-Caribbean Millennium Center on Dudley Road, New Style Radio, 98.7 FM, Breakthrough Media Studios, and Breakthrough TV.